All right, today we are diving into one of the most counterintuitive and honestly, one of the most important secrets in all of personal finance. And it's this: getting money is one skill, but keeping it, that's a completely different game. And as we're about to see, it's that second skill that truly defines what it means to be wealthy. So, let me tell you a quick story. It's a tale of two fortunes. On one side, you've got a guy named Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, a gas station attendant, lived in rural Vermont his whole life. Super frugal guy. But when he passed away in 2014, he left behind a secret fortune of nearly $8 million. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you have Richard Fuscone, Harvard-educated, top executive at Merrill Lynch, a real titan of finance. Well, the very same year Ronald Reed's secret wealth came to light, Richard Fuscone declared bankruptcy.
So what gives, right? How on earth does a janitor build an $8 million fortune while a Harvard-educated finance expert loses everything? Well, the answer, and this is the core of what we're talking about today, has almost nothing to do with intelligence or education. It has everything to do with behavior and a completely different way of thinking about what wealth really is.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this paradox, we first need to look at the psychology of getting rich. Think of this as the sprint. It's aggressive, it's optimistic, it's all about audacity. And there's really no better case study for this mindset than one of the most legendary traders who ever lived.
This is Jesse Livermore. Now picture this. It's October 1929. The stock market is absolutely collapsing and the Great Depression is kicking off. Livermore walks home, his family is terrified, they think they're ruined, but he's calm. Why? Because he hadn't just survived the crash, he had bet against the market. In a single day, he made the equivalent of over $3 billion in today's money. He was an absolute master at the art of getting rich.
But here's where the story takes a tragic turn. That incredible success, it bred an incredible overconfidence. He started making bigger and bigger bets, using massive leverage. And by 1933, just 4 years after his greatest moment, it was all gone. He lost everything. Broke and totally ashamed, he eventually took his own life. He had completely mastered getting wealthy, but he failed catastrophically at staying wealthy.
And Livermore himself, he knew exactly what went wrong. He diagnosed his own failure perfectly with this quote. His greatest strength, that unbreakable confidence, that willingness to take massive risks, it became his fatal flaw. The very same traits that built his empire were the ones that burned it to the ground.
So here's the key takeaway from his story. Getting wealthy, it often demands this sprinter's mentality, right? It's about taking risks, having this bold, almost borderline crazy optimism, and really putting yourself out there. These are the tools you need for accumulation. But as Jesse Livermore's life tragically proves, those are the absolute wrong tools for preservation.
All right, so that's the sprint. Now let's flip the script and talk about the science of staying rich. This isn't a sprint at all. This is a marathon. And it's way less about moments of genius and way more about the simple art of survival.
Take a look at this number, $7 million. This is the fortune that a woman named Grace Groner left to charity when she died in 2010 at age 100. She was a secretary her whole life, lived in a simple one-bedroom house, so where did all that money come from? Humble savings, invested for 80 years with the power of compounding doing all the heavy lifting. That's it, seriously. No genius stock picks, no huge risks, just time and consistency.
And this really gets to the heart of it. This quote from Morgan Housel nails it. The goal isn't necessarily about making a bunch of brilliant decisions. It's about consistently avoiding the really, really bad ones. It's about survival. It's about making sure you don't make that one catastrophic mistake that takes you out of the game for good.
So how did people like Ronald Reed and Grace Groner actually pull this off? Well, their habits were almost boringly simple. They lived below their means. They bought stocks in solid blue-chip companies they actually understood, like Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, and then they just held on. They reinvested the dividends, they didn't chase the hot new tech stock, and they didn't panic when the market went down. Their secret weapon above all else was patience.
So when you put these two skill sets side by side, the difference is it's night and day. Getting wealthy often takes risk, optimism, a bit of audacity. But staying wealthy, that demands almost the exact opposite. It demands humility to know that luck was a huge part of your success. It demands frugality to keep the goalposts from moving. And it demands a healthy dose of paranoia to realize that everything you've built can be taken away in a flash.
Okay, so if these two paths are so incredibly different, how in the world do you navigate them? Well, you need a North Star, a lodestar. And in the world of investing, that is your core philosophy. NYU professor Aswath Damodaran, one of the greats in finance, puts it perfectly. If you don't have a core set of beliefs about how you think markets work and where you might have an edge, you're going to get tossed around by every market fad, every news headline, and every emotion. You'll fall for everything.
And look, the consequences of not having a philosophy are real. You end up just chasing whatever stock or fund did great last year. You become a super easy target for scams that promise you the world. And maybe worst of all, when your one-trick pony strategy, like say only buying stocks with a low price-to-earnings ratio, stops working, you've got nothing else. Your investing cupboard is empty.
So this is the fundamental question you have to ask yourself. Where do you believe you have an edge? What do you believe about how markets work? Do you think they overreact to bad news, creating bargains? Do they undervalue boring, steady companies? Is your edge in analyzing high-growth potential, or is it in valuing solid assets that are already in place? Your answer is the bedrock of a philosophy that will actually work for you.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the why. Now let's get into the how. How do we actually put this into practice? Let's build a toolkit, a survivor's toolkit, with some real actionable strategies for building a portfolio that's designed to last.
One of the most powerful ideas for this is something called the barbell strategy, made famous by Nassim Taleb. The idea is simple. You avoid the mushy, moderate risk middle. Instead, you go to the extremes. You put the vast majority of your portfolio in something incredibly safe that protects you from total ruin. And then you take the small remaining part and put it into highly speculative bets that have massive, explosive upside.
So here's what that could look like. Maybe you put 90% of your money into something like cash or short-term treasury bills, assets that tend to do well when everything else is falling apart. Then, the other 10%? That goes into things like venture capital funds, maybe some crypto or other really high-risk, high-reward plays. Now, the beauty of this is that you've totally captured your downside. The absolute most you can lose is 10%, but your upside? It's practically unlimited. It's a strategy that is both paranoid and optimistic at the exact same time. And building on that idea of safety, there's a whole category of assets we can think of as survivor assets. These are things that have proven time and time again throughout history that they have an incredible ability to weather financial storms, usually because their value isn't just based on a good story.
What's just incredible is how consistent these assets are. I mean, gold has been a store of value for 5,000 years. It thrives when things get uncertain, like it did in 2008. Farmland? Its value is tied to an essential human need. We all have to eat. And get this, since the year 2000, in 26 out of the 28 quarters where the S&P 500 lost money, farmland actually posted positive returns. And of course, short-term treasuries are the ultimate safe haven where everyone runs when there's panic.
And this right here is why survival is the only game that matters. The history of finance is just a massive graveyard of sure things. Remember Pets.com, the dot-com darling, went to zero. Lehman Brothers? A 158-year-old institution? Gone. Terra/Luna? That $40 billion crypto project? It vanished in about 72 hours. These stories teach a brutal, brutal lesson. When the story breaks, some assets don't just go down. They cease to exist.
And this all brings us to what might be the single most important idea in this entire explainer. When we see someone driving a fancy sports car, our brain immediately thinks, wow, they're wealthy. But the truth is, all we know for sure is that they have $100,000 less wealth than they did before they bought the car. Real wealth is quiet. It's what you don't see. It's the savings, the investments, the assets that give you freedom, flexibility, and control over the one thing you can never get back, your time. And so that leaves us with one final big question to think about. It is so easy to focus on getting big returns and building a portfolio full of winners. But the stories of the janitor and the finance titan, the trader and the secretary, they teach us a much deeper lesson. The real goal isn't just to get rich. It's to make sure you're never, ever forced to stop playing the game. So are you just building a portfolio for growth, or are you building a plan for survival so that growth has enough time to compound into something truly extraordinary?